You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Hey, we are back. We are talking to David Meerman Scott, who's a marketing strategist. He's the best-selling author of 8 books, including 3 international bestsellers, and he's a professional speaker on topics that include marketing, leadership, and social media. And David and I have something in common, which is that we both started our careers on Wall Street at a company called Dean Witter. David, a pleasure to have you.
Hey, it's great to be here, Doug. Yeah, back in the day, good old Dean Witter.
It doesn't. Now it eventually became Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, and then Morgan Stanley, and who knows what it'll be tomorrow. Listen, a lot of people ask me why I'm bringing a marketing guy onto the show, which is really a personal finance show here. And I understand you've done some research about how Fortune 100 companies who do good public relations actually perform better. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. It was fascinating what I learned. It was in preparation for a book I wrote called Real-Time Marketing and PR that came out about 1.5 years ago. And I'm fascinated with companies that engage their marketplace using the tools of instant communications, things like Twitter, things like blogs, companies that get back to customers if they email them very, very quickly. So I did a little test where I reached out to each one of the Fortune 100 companies through a couple of different methodologies to find out if they would get back to me. And it turns out that only 28% of the Fortune 100 companies, US-based Fortune 100 companies, actually ended up engaging with me as a writer who wanted to find out more information about them. And then I looked to see, do they have online ways to contact them on their websites and so on. So only 28%. But the thing that was fascinating was that the 28% of the Fortune 100 companies that did engage with me had a 3% on average increase in their stock price during the period of time that I measured, which was roughly a year. The companies that did not engage had a stock price that went down on average 2% during the same period.
Wow.
and the market as a whole during that period went down a little bit less than 1%. The other thing that I wanted to measure was that just because there were a couple of outliers skewing the average. So I looked at the numbers of companies that went up versus the companies that went down, and it turns out that 2/3 of the companies which do engage instantly with their marketplace had stock prices that went up during this period of time that the overall market as measured by the S&P 500 went down. And it turns out that 2/3 of the companies that do not engage instantly had stock prices that went down during that period. So what I conclude from this is that it is really important for companies to engage their marketplace, to respond to customers, to provide ways for people to contact them. And the companies that do that tend to be more successful. And I think we can learn something about that as investors, as personal investors, or certainly even professional investors. I was almost going to figure out how to buy a basket of stocks of the 28 companies, 100 shares, but gosh, they're that much more successful on average. What does that tell you about how to pick a stock?
Mm-hmm. You could make your own index, the David Meerman Scott Index, of the top Fortune 100 companies that have good customer communication. Would you consider this the communication or public relations, or are they the same thing?
It's a combination. It's a combination because the ones, are they responsive on email? Do they even publish a way to reach them on email? Do they have ways that you can reach them through social media? Do they have a Facebook page? Do they have a Twitter profile? These sorts of things are all interrelated, and they all go back to how willing is this organization to engage with their customers, to engage with the marketplace. And you have a lot of organizations, and there's certainly the vast majority of the Fortune 100 companies that kind of just put up a barrier, put up a wall. These are the companies when you call them on the telephone, you end up in voicemail hell, and you can't get a person to pick up the telephone. So it's all interrelated, and I think it shows that the companies that are willing to engage with their customers are the companies that are more successful.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it's the whole corporate culture there is about dealing with people and caring more about the customer, which I guess ultimately would lead to hopefully an increase in stock price. And the difference is huge. If you're talking about 500 basis points between the winners and the losers.
It's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. And it was just fascinating to see that huge result. And it's really funny when I'm on the speaking circuit, I pop up a list of the 100 companies and whether they were part of the 28% or part of the rest. And you can see people who work for these big companies, they oh my God, where'd my company show up?
It would be more interesting if the audiences could sort of, if they would guess correctly, they say, oh yeah, I've called this company and I got good service, or I called them and I got bad service.
Yeah, it is very, very interesting.
We're talking to David Meerman Scott. He's a marketing strategist. He wrote a number of best-selling books, including a book called New Rules of Marketing and PR. David, one of the things I think you're known for, certainly most interesting, is that you've made a number of comparisons to the Grateful Dead, which for those of our younger listeners was a very popular band a few years ago. Obviously, for those of us who are a little older who listened to them growing up, we certainly appreciate the music, but they were around well before the internet. How is it that you use them as an example of good PR?
Oh, yeah, I love talking about the Grateful Dead, so thanks for the question. It's really interesting that the Grateful Dead created a social network, a network of fans, even before Mark Zuckerberg was born. And what they did was they allowed, among other things, allowed fans to record their concerts. So every other band, whether it was the Rolling Stones or the Who or whoever it was, on the ticket and signs up at the venue would say no cameras, no recording devices allowed. But the Grateful Dead said, sure, why not? Bring your camera, bring your tape recorder. And they even provided people who wanted to tape the concerts with tickets that were in the best place to get the best sound quality. And they allowed them to bring in all this elaborate equipment with microphones that they stuck into the air and whatnot. And as a result, people like me learned about the Grateful Dead through this huge collection of bootleg tapes, cassette tapes back in the day, now they're all MP3s, that people would circulate around. And the more music you listen to, the more you like the Grateful Dead, and then people would say, well, shoot, I want to go to a live show. If it's this good I want to be in the audience. And as a result, they became the most popular live band of the era, selling over $1 billion worth of concert tickets during their career. And so to me, I can draw a really interesting conclusion here, and that is that companies should be putting their information out there for free with no barrier to be able to get the information. So I'm thinking about companies, for example, that offer B2B companies, business-to-business companies that offer white papers, for example, or consumer companies that provide guides to their products or whatever on the web. Typically, they offer those with a barrier, and typically that barrier is that you have to give an email address in order to download the information. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the method that most bands use. It's like, no, you can't have this unless you jump through hoops. The Grateful Dead said, sure, here, take it. We'll develop a community. And it turns out that the companies that offer stuff completely free with no barriers, putting that white paper out for free with no email requirement, end up getting many, many, many more people who look at their information and talk about it and generate high search engine results and so on. I think it's kind of related to what we talked about before, is that the companies that are more engaged with the marketplace online are the companies that are more successful. And it's amazing to me that that we can thank, as the pioneers of this sort of idea, a rock band that started in San Francisco.
What about companies who are in the business of actually selling information? And just for example, like we have a division of the company that does online investor education, and it's the business. And that's exactly what my business is. I write books. I have 8 books. And, if you want one of my books, you have to buy it. You have to go to get a physical copy or a Kindle or iPad to get a virtual copy. And
And I also deliver speeches for which I get paid. But I offer personally tons of free information. I have a blog. I have a bunch of free ebooks. I have all kinds of information that I provide for free. And so I look at myself as a one-person publishing company. And I think companies that publish information and make their money by selling information should also give away parts of what they sell as ways that people can learn about what it is that they sell. And it's funny how few companies are really willing to do that, particularly in the professional area. You see a lot of it in consumer, where you go to a website of a publication, the New York Times, for example, and part of it is free and part of it is paid. That's an interesting model. And I think that for professional publications, for financial information or whatever it might be, have a lot of information for free, and then have ways that people can then purchase the more elaborate or more detailed information, and then make money that way.
So let's talk about that from the standpoint of a small business. Let's say that you're a small financial advisor or any sort of professional. You give out a lot of free information to try to attract people to ultimately either buy your books or your courses. We say how wonderful the internet is, that it's democratized the field so everyone can participate, but ultimately, don't you think that people will just want to go to the big names in order to get that information, and why bother going to the smaller people?
No, because ultimately the best information wins. What's really cool about Google and the other search engines is that they really do a very good job at surfacing the information that's the best in a particular area. What I mean by that is if a very small company has information on a particular topic that's better, that's more thorough, that's better written, or that has better graphics, or combination of all those things, eventually over time people will find it. They'll talk about it. They'll talk about it on Facebook. They'll talk about it on LinkedIn. They'll talk about it on Twitter. They'll blog about it. Then the media might find it and might write about it. Magazines, radio, television, newspapers might talk about it. And as a result, the search engines are very clever at then surfacing that as the best information in that category. So if somebody goes to Google and types in high yield stocks in the Netherlands, and there's a very small investment advisor based in the Netherlands that's doing a great job at analyzing high yield stocks, that information may come up first, way above a company like, say, Salomon Brothers or Barclays Bank.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have been talking with David Meerman Scott, who's a marketing strategist, a former Wall Street guy. He's also the best-selling author of 8 books. David, I'm very sorry that we're just about out of time. It's really, truly been fascinating. You said that you give out some ebooks. Can you tell people how can they follow you?
Great. So you can follow me on Twitter. I am DM Scott, DMSCOTT. My full name is David Meerman Scott, so you can Google that and find me. I also offer a bunch of free ebooks. The easiest way to find my free books is to Google the name of one of those ebooks. The name of the ebook is called The New Rules of Viral Marketing. The New Rules of Viral Marketing, which has been downloaded an amazing 1.5 million times. So
holy cow.
1,500,000 and first by
right now.
And those are some great ways to reach me.
Great. Okay. David Meerman Scott, thanks so much for your time.
Doug, thank you. Great talking with you.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.